Welcome to the ShiftED podcast. This is episode number 15. And today we had a great conversation with Cindy Hovington. She's from the Curious Neuron. And we really looked at kind of some holiday ideas around toys, kids, play, and the kinds of things that engage kids and also help them learn. It was a great conversation. Hope you enjoy it. We're going to talk today with Cindy Hovington of the Curious Neuron, and we're going to talk about toys, the best toys for our youngest learners, or types of things you should put in front of young learners to help them develop themselves. So thanks, Cindy, for coming in and, well, actually connecting via the internets.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
It's been fun talking with you and kind of getting to know you a little bit before we do this. So I'm super excited and curious about what you have to offer or what you're going to talk to us about. But I mean, let's just start off a little background of how did you get to this stage? Like, how did you get into thinking about early childhood development and encouraging it and talking about it and getting the word out? Where did it all begin?
So it's a bit of a mix. So my PhD at McGill University is in neuroscience. I was studying schizophrenia, psychosis, and how mental health impacts cognitive skills and how it impacts emotions. So those two parts are what I took with me later on now with Curious Neuron. When I was doing my PhD, it was interesting to me because most of the people or the patients that we were seeing at the Douglas Mental Health Institute were like younger, were teens or young adults, and they were still in the classroom. And so my own thinking shifted to kind of how are they learning? How are they able to do that when I know I'm seeing it through results? They're having struggles with their verbal memory or their executive functions, and they have to plan and organize in school, and they're having these moments of hearing voices or seeing things, but how do they function in everyday life? So I went into science education for my postdoctoral studies, and I wanted to understand like the science, like the education system and how that works and how we could really be more mindful of mental health. That's where I was in my learning. But then I ended up having a child during my postdoc, and then soon had a second one after that. And I left research. I left the clinic at that point. I was working in a clinic, and I decided that there wasn't enough out there for parents that was evidence-based. There are lots of groups and mom groups, which are helpful, of course, but what was in the research? Why, as a parent, I don't want somebody to tell me what to do and how to do it, but I want them to give me the why behind why I should do it. And right. I started doing that. I started explaining the research behind parenting behaviors. What's overprotection, talking about play, talking about child development. And I'm trying to create this environment for parents that is curious and compassionate towards them, as well as teaching them to do that with their child. And the more curious and compassionate we are with each other, the more we can help each other and learn about each other. So that's the whole goal. And that's what I'm doing now. It's grown to a community of 129,000 online, and it keeps growing. And I think parents just wanted that kind of community to help them.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, your followers on Instagram, your posts are amazing. By the way, I mean, I really like, they're insightful, and they're little snippets of information. What is it that, Cindy, that you think the biggest misconceptions are about early childhood development? Because I mean, I'm a consultant for preschool with the new preschool cycle program, and I do get a sense sometimes that the understanding of play and early childhood development is something that needs a little bit more light shed on it. Yeah. In your opinion, what do you think some of those misconceptions are that parents have?
Yeah, and I think that's why play for me is something I keep talking about, because there are lots of misconceptions. One of them is that term educational toy, which I keep talking about because I just want people to know that it's not about flashing lights and ABCs and 1, 2, 3s when it comes to a toy that's educational. The marketing department, they do really well. They do a good job at making sure that you think it's educational, but it's not. And it's not, I don't want to like put down any toy companies, but educational. If there's an article in the Journal of Pediatrics that talks about true educational toys, and they are the ones that increase in interaction between a caregiver and a child. So if you think about that, anything, a measuring cup, a bowl, a wooden spoon in your home can be an educational toy. If you are sitting there with your child and like talking with them and saying, oh, are you baking a cake? Are you pretending to bake a cake? Oh, what kind of cake is it? That item is creating an interaction between the two of you. So if you do have some of these items that, you press buttons and it sings and it counts and it, just take the batteries out. Not all of them, obviously. There are times where kids are curious about that and excited, but remove the batteries and increase the language and the interaction between the two of you, because that is when you're going to have or reap the benefits of play. It's when a child is communicating with somebody. It could be you, it could be a friend, it could be themselves if they're trying to figure something out. But that's one of the biggest, I think, like misconceptions. Another one is that we've kind of overcomplicated it. We've overcomplicated it in the way that we think our role is to always be there, number one, and that they need a lot within their environment. And I think back to when I was raised, and I hate saying like, the old days, but in the old days, I think back to, I would go to my grandmother's house every morning, and basically from the moment I arrived to the moment I left, I was by myself. My grandmother would not sit down and play with me. Obviously there were interactions, but the interactions were when I was assisting her with her everyday chores. And there's a book it's called Hunt Gather. I forget it. Hunt Gather Parent, and it comes back to the hunter gatherer of like, okay, you're following the parent. Okay, what do you need to do? You need to plant a garden. You need to go get some food. You need to hunt. You need to take care of bringing our kids into our everyday chores, whether it's at home or at school. That's where they're learning, because they're learning to be patient. When you put a cake in the oven, you need to wait. As much as you want it, you have to wait. That's what's teaching them, that delayed gratification. They're learning to organize socks. If you have laundry to sort and you have these unmatched socks, they're going to learn how to sort it. They're going to learn how to organize, put things back in its place as they see you doing that. And there's a lot more learning there than not a tablet, but like some sort of toy that sings ABCs and 1, 2, 3s.
Squeaks and makes a lot of noise and flashes and stuff. Yeah.
But I think as a society, we've begun to place a lot more focus on those really highly marketed, educational toys, when in the end we have just about everything we need in our home. And we put pressure on ourselves, because I will get emails from parents feeling bad that they haven't done enough for their child in terms of development and learning because they can't afford certain toys. And I tell them, you don't need a $100 rainbow, a wooden rainbow in your home for your child to thrive. If you have it there, sure, no problem, your child will play with it. But if you have a sorting tray from like the dollar store, you're good to go. That's okay. So somewhere we've lost the actual true essence of play, which is curiosity and creativity. We've lost that a little bit, through our society and over-organized like days and scheduled days where you have like this activity and that activity. It's okay to have all of those, but we've just brought everything to a certain extreme.
Yeah. It almost seems like the simplicity is like almost instinctual, like what you normally would do, just do it. And if your child is there, they're observing, you're interacting. It's like, you don't need to surround them with, the latest things. I mean, and similar to what you were saying, I mean, think about our past. I mean, we're pre iPhones and tablets and what we used to do as kids to play. I mean, it would be simple. I mean, It's funny though. I was talking with a colleague and she was saying that she has all of those educational toys and, but her son loves boxes, So he prefers the box that carries the thing to the house than the actual.
I believe it.
So I love that idea. Yeah.
It's intriguing.
And there's possibilities to it, right? It's not finite where it's locked in this kind of shell of this is what it does. There's like offshoots. You could create anything with it,
Exactly. And that comes back to the simplicity of it. And it's funny that you said that, because I have in front of me a box. Right. And I literally went into like my kids' play space upstairs and I looked to see like what they've been playing with. And I grabbed this is from the dollar store. And they've been playing with this for maybe 4 or 5 years nonstop. It was $1. And it's just to say that you're right about the simplicity, because I think there was a study that compared two play environments, one with 4 toys only and one that had 12 toys, different toys. So, like different types. So it's okay if it's like a Legos, but that's considered one toy. And then so 4 versus 12. And the kids that were in the environment with 4 toys played much longer and focused longer on what they were doing. And they are assuming as well that when you're focused longer, because it wasn't a long-term study, but when you're focused longer, there's a lot more learning happening. And the learning is through exploring and being curious about something and just connecting. Like if you just have the Legos in front of you versus the Legos and the magnetic tiles and building block, like all of these kinds of toys, it's overwhelming. And I always like to compare that to either a menu at a restaurant or a fridge for adults, right? When you go to you're at the restaurant and they have like every single type of food on the menu, it's overwhelming. And all of a sudden you're not hungry anymore. And you're like, well, I don't know. I came here hungry, but now I don't know if I want like Mexican or Italian or Greek food. I have no idea because I didn't anticipate this. Same thing with their fridge. We could be hungry and we have tons of leftovers and we open the fridge and it's overwhelming. And you're like, oh, you just close the fridge. Because all of a sudden your brain's overwhelmed and there's too much to think of in that moment. The same thing applies for our children. So if we simplify their play environment and have very few things, but strategic things, boxes, sorting trays, spoons, little items that they can create into whatever they want it to be, then all of a sudden that environment becomes extremely powerful in terms of play and learning, rather than like having everything around them.
Absolutely. Well, I've been doing a lot of research behind choice as well and giving students choice. I mean, I think it applies to the younger students as well, that they do get overwhelmed if you have too much choice, because it takes practice to figure out the right choices for who you are. And it can be, oftentimes teachers tell me if they give too much choice to students, they're overwhelmed and they'll go to the easiest thing because it doesn't demand much of them. So interesting point. So what do you have for us? Like, what do you have as some toys that you love?
Yes. So like I said, this wooden box, I have 3 kids and they play pretend all the time. And they're always pretending to do things that we do in everyday life, whether it's going to the bank or the groceries or the library or pretending to play office. So I do have like old keyboards. They each have like a really old rundown keyboard that they love to play with. I have these like trays as well, like from the dollar store, and inside these particular ones are like wooden toys, and it's just like loose parts. This was gifted, so it's they get expensive, these little wooden toys. However, it could be anything from the dollar store. I have containers and containers of loose parts. These are buttons. This was from Walmart, and I just literally sometimes will take out this tray or the box that I showed you, and I put that in their play environment, and they will decide what it is. It's not up to me to decide. They are the masters of play. And so, and I think of even at the dollar store, these are these random jewels, like just these and the kids love it. They love it because they're like, each one is a treasure, by the way, right? Like
sure.
It really is. And they take care of it. And I mean, again, that was from the dollar store. So just first having these sort of trays, and this again, this is from the dollar store, just anything that has divisions, because all of a sudden you give them a little spoon with any of these loose parts and they are doing something. I don't know, even my 3-year-old, he gets lost in his world and he's talking to himself and just like sorting it out and saying, oh, okay, let's do this. And I don't know what's going on in his head. And it's interesting also because my older ones are 3 and 5. And I know, sorry, 3, 5, and 7. So my older one's 5 and 7. Things are different. I used to sit with them a lot more and play. And now when I sit down, I'm interrupting them. And that reminds you about something when it comes to play. I think we often think even when we think about playing, we want to make sure that our kids are learning. So we'll come and we'll say, oh, how many are there? How many blue ones? How many, can you sort them? Or, what about here? I have dominoes. They use this to play bank. It could be money. It could be, but again, they're all loose parts. And I do ask questions once in a while, but we have to be aware of that as either parents or educators, that we are asking too much, because now we're going back to the other end extreme of like not really helping with the curiosity and the learning, because we're interrupting play. They're in the middle of something. So we're better off just waiting a little bit and narrating if we have to with younger kids. Oh, I see that you put 3 little blue chips inside your container. You can say that. But you don't have to stop them from doing whatever they were doing in the middle of it and asking them to count it. So that's another thing. I think when it comes to play, there are 2 important things. What are you creating? What sort of environment are you creating, for play, but also your own role? Are you talking a lot in their environment, or are you allowing space, and are you letting them guide you rather than telling them, here are some jewels and some little buttons. Today you're going to pretend that it's ice cream and you're going to put it in a cup. Perhaps that day is not ice cream day for that child in their brain. Perhaps it's snow and they're selling snow today because we just had a snowstorm, and now they're pretending that, but if we let them, if we give them that sort of space to create on their own, all of a sudden now that's where the learning is, and that open-endedness, not having a goal, because everything else in the day is structured. Let's give them just that, right? Like, let's give them the playtime to structure it themselves and figure out what it is, and give them that space, rather than like telling them what they're doing, how they're doing it, for how long, and so on. Let's give them that.
For sure. I like what you're saying, that you're creating more of the environment for them to play in rather than guiding their play. And it's just the materials that you choose to put in front of them, and then kind of stepping back. And you're playing more of an observing,
exactly,
not preventing. Now, why is that important though? Like, why shouldn't we be guiding our kids, or students to go in certain directions? Or like, I think what I'm saying this kind of a little bit tongue in cheek, that I think that the developmental phases that children go through is a natural process, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that question. So yes and no, it depends. Okay, what I like let's just start with a baby. Let's say a baby who's placed on the floor on their tummy, and there's items in front of them. They're going to explore. How are they going to explore that? They might take an item. I have a little drinking cup here, but they might take it. They might bang it on the floor. They might put it in their mouth. They might like look inside. They might, want to put something inside the cup, see what fits, what doesn't fit, and they might toss it. That is learning, right? So the same thing happens with an older child. There's still a learning. There's a learning of how to interact with the student that's beside them, or the child that's beside them. How do I get that cup if I want it in their hands, right? Like learning by either taking it away and learning that didn't work and that person got mad. So that stepping back is really important. However, as an educator, if there is a learning goal to that, it's okay to step in. It's not about always stepping back, but just being mindful of how much you are. And if there is a learning goal and you do want your children to learn how to count, and you have all these loose parts in front of them, minimize it. Like, don't give them a full container of buttons, but minimizing it and then counting it out loud yourself first, and then playing bank, let's say, where the buttons could be coins and you need 3 coins. So now you're increasing, you're still playing there, and they're leading the situation, but you've strategically created a situation where you're asking them for $2 and you want them to give you 2 buttons back. So that's what I mean. It's just about being mindful of how much you're doing it, and also giving them space to be in control. And the reason, I think that was the second part of your question, but the reason why it's important, it's interesting because I'm writing a blog post now for a company. I work with different toy companies and apps, and this particular companies that sort of struggle with showing the importance of their toys are the ones that are open-ended. I've worked with an open-ended app called Pock Pock, and people really struggle to see, like, all you're doing is, it's like a pretend play environment, and you place like the pie in the oven, and then the oven cooks the pie, and then it comes out, and if you place it again, it burns the pie because you already cooked it. And then you can take the pie and go outside and toss it into the water fountain, and then you can toss like the laundry into the water fountain or into the washing machine. But just to say, my kids will play longer and stay more focused with that because there's no goal. And when we remove that goal from the kids, there's a curiosity aspect. And a lot of parents, once their kids start school, they tell me, my child's not motivated. How do I get them to feel motivated to do what they want. And it comes back to play when they were young. When a child is given the opportunity to go towards what they're curious about, whether it's a baby knocking something on the floor, seeing if it makes sounds or if it breaks or if it rolls, or a 4 or 5-year-old that's in an environment that has been strategically created for them to be curious about what's inside this little container and what can I place inside this container and will it close if I put too much inside? They become internally motivated. And those are all the things that they are developing executive function skills because they're learning how to plan, how to sort, how to organize. They're learning how to stay focused much longer because they are interested in what they are doing. And all of that will translate to early academics that will be a little bit more easier for them because they might have more ease in terms of thinking outside the box when they're doing math, and they might have stronger executive function skills. So for projects, they'll have a little bit more ease in terms of creating a plan for it and organizing it. And what do I do first? And what do I do next? Those are all skills that we build through play. And that curiosity, again, leads to that creative aspect, and that creative aspect leads you to think outside the box a little bit more easily, which leads to higher academic performance and skills. So all of it goes back to that environment and how we've created it. And then that leads to more skills when they're starting school.
Right. So, I mean, what I think what you're saying is to create those environments that are playful and then just kind of slowly back away and let the child take over those functions of playing. And that is learning for them, right? Like,
exactly.
It's tough because we have this idea of teaching, right? Like we have to instruct our child and we have to make sure that they have a great start. And I got to make sure they know all this stuff. And it's really the opposite of that, really. It's more of create an environment and then back away. And they naturally will start to develop. It's not something that is finite or fixed. And you have to, like filling the glass up, like you're the knowledge giver.
It's very different. Exactly. In early childhood, it's the opposite of what we've been taught to do in the sense of like giving that information. They will construct that information on their own through the environment that we've created. So if you want it to be a language environment, then add the right objects within that environment that have some letters, loose parts that are letters, or printed out sheets with the alphabet, and then you put Play-Doh beside it, and then they have to kind of like just trace the letter, like create the letter with their Play-Doh. Buttons, if you have some printed out alphabets, you can also ask them to cover the letter A or C with their buttons. Create that would be the role of the facilitator. In research, they call it the facilitator, just the person who's there to kind of facilitate the learning in the environment, but the learning is done by the child. And then again, like learning sounds, having the items, pictures and saying, oh, that's a banana. What letter do you think that starts with? Just saying it out loud if they don't know, but banana and starting that kind of environment. If it's a math day or math afternoon, then having those loose parts. If it's a day where you want to help them with concentration, I have 1 second. It's funny because my uncle likes to like build stuff in his garage, and I was like, can you build me like this really
cool.
I mean, it's like an old piece of wood, but just to say, like, my kids absolutely love this, but all three of them, and the 3, 5, and 7-year-old, it doesn't matter, they're going to sit there and focus on putting in the little bolts and putting in the screws, and it's just about having that environment. Again, it could be very simple, that wasn't hard to build, and it was just strategic, again, of me placing it in an environment, because I'll think of, okay, today, what are we doing? Math. Okay, I'm going to put all the loose parts out. Or today, what are we playing with? Today, I just want them to learn how to focus on something for a long time. Let's take everything out of the environment and put just that, so that they're putting the screws, or I'm going to put that and a little cashier register. And then they're playing hardware store. It changes the environment completely. And as a facilitator, it's my role to create that environment, but then just to kind of guide it and lead them. Step back.
It's interesting you say that too, because we're kind of like discussing with the preschool program of creating like kits or framing certain materials and then handing them over to the students and see what happens with them. And similar to what you were just saying with the hardware, where a hardware store, you put various materials in, but you don't really know where it's going to go, right? The kids in the end are going to be directors of that play. And you're just giving them a bunch of materials to play with that maybe have a connection, and they'll find those connections. It's not for the teachers to say, okay, well, you're going to do this first and then you'll do that next. And like, you just got to really create that kind of, get the materials, create an environment, and then kind of let it loose.
Yes, exactly. And it's funny now that you're saying that, I'm realizing this is what my kids did. They kind of piled one over the other and made like a sandwich. And that was my 3-year-old that played with it last. So I never tell them, like, they have all the parts. I never told them what to do with them. I just gave it to them. And one interesting part is when you step back, it's the learning comes back to also emotion skills, emotion regulation skills. Right. It is so frustrating to have a little screw and to try to put it in there. There's another one that I have that's just holes, and you have to put in the screw with a screwdriver. Okay. If you've never taught them how to put in the screw and they're trying to do it, they will get really mad, especially a 3 or 4-year-old. It's frustrating. It's like, I don't even know what to do with this, and you haven't told me. But that is the goal, right? The goal is for them to get frustrated and try to figure it out. And if they can't, to learn how to ask for help before they become overly upset. And when they do get upset, when they are trying to get it in there, and I strategically put different sizes so that one might not fit one size. And I remember one of my kids like getting so mad and like, it doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit. And I was like, oh, and then in my head, it's like this, my plan worked, right? Like in the sense of, I wanted you to get to that level, because now as a facilitator, even more importantly than anything else, is me teaching you how to regulate your emotions and how to ask for help. And that's the social emotional part. So now I can say, like, I can see that you're really mad about this. So let's see what worked. And then he'll show me, I tried to put it here. It's not fitting. Have you tried different sizes or different pegs? And then he might say yes and no. And that's where all the learning happens, because now I'm teaching him how to think through it and how to problem solve. And now I can help him with that part of it. So to me, that's the most powerful part of stepping back, is seeing what they need help with and where they're struggling and how to support their emotions and their communication with you.
Yeah, that's key too, and we see that in schools, right? The low threshold for persistence in students. It's something that needs to get developed more, because without that, I mean, no problem solving can happen, right? Because it's just like, I can't do this, and then it's kind of a carte blanche to say, okay, I'm no good at this, as opposed to pushing themselves and figuring it out and struggling a little bit. That resilience is a real key thing in schools, that we notice that when kids don't have a high capacity to carry on after being challenged, really affects their whole schooling aspect.
Of course. Yeah.
And it's tough for teachers, I think, too, because we want kids to succeed, right? We want to see success. So at times I think that we try to overcompensate for their lack of resilience, so that they can feel like they succeeded. But in the end, I don't know if that helps very much.
Well, no, because then you'll be in another situation tomorrow, the day after, and then they're still in that same position of thinking that like they're not good enough, or they're not getting to the answer quickly enough. Right. You know, when I think of my child who gets frustrated when he's playing with this, it takes me 15-ish minutes to kind of calm him down and to guide him. I wouldn't be able to do that if I had 30 other kids or 20 other kids, right? So there's a systemic issue around this whole thing. Because if I'm trying to build his resilience, I need him to experience adversity. I need him to experience, those issues, those things where he's just struggling and he can't figure it out. And I need him to get mad and I need him to get upset. But then he needs me by his side to guide him and to guide his thinking and to motivate him. So if I have 3 kids at home, but 2 could play while I'm taking care of one of them. But if I had more, there wouldn't be an opportunity for this. So I think, yes, I think as a goal, we know that we want kids to be resilient. We all know that, whether we're parents or educators. But then even as a parent, sometimes when a child is trying to tie their shoe and you're late for work, you'll do it for them. Mm-hmm. And it's coming from a good place. Like, you're going to be late for work. You have no choice, or they're going to be late for school. You have to bring them. So we tie their shoe, but where's the learning would have been in them getting really upset, trying to tie their shoe. them trying to put it on and putting it on the wrong foot and having to take it off, them tying it and realizing it doesn't look like a knot at all. But that's 15, 20 minutes, which we don't have. And we need to keep our jobs, and we need to make sure they're not late. So as a society, we've created like an urgency in everything that we do, and time, and cutting the time short for everything. But it's life. It's what we live in right now. But that's why I think it's important, whether the child is in school or at home, to be mindful of that and to balance it off. You won't be able to let your child tie their shoe every single time. But when you come home, if the child isn't crying and they're hungry and whatever it is, if you have that extra 10 minutes, ask them to put their shoes on, like take them off and then say, oh, can you put them back on? Let's go back outside. I forgot something in the car. And take that moment, as hard as it is as a parent, to like breathe and watch your kids struggling, just to let them make that mistake, whether it's through play as well, or cooking. Some people say like there's no way you let 3 kids in the kitchen cook, and I'm like, yep. There's a disaster most of the time right after, but there's so much learning that happened. The other day they were making, like, they made a wonton soup, 3 kids on their own. I stepped back. It was a beautiful disaster in the end. However, they learned the process, of preparing the meat first and opening up the little wonton, whatever it's called, the squares, and then stuffing it up, and then learning how to close it. And so there was a lot of learning that happened there, but it took a lot of time. Just about finding the right moments.
Absolutely. Well, and you're right. I mean, time is always precious nowadays. And the juggling act that we all have to go through daily is something else. I think that we do a wonderful job overall. And I mean, I really appreciate your insights and just small little things that we can do to encourage more play with students and our kids. And I think you gave us some really cool ideas on some types of toys or more play environments. It's more of like you're creating a play environment rather than the stuff. But it can be very simple, and it should be fairly simple.
It should.
I pulled one of your things from Instagram. Keep it simple. Keep play simple. It can be that easy.
But that's exactly it. It's about, again, putting that play keyboard. Like, if sometimes I'll change environment and there's an old keyboard, there's a container, there's an old shoebox, and I put like Post-it pads that I got from the dollar store. There might be a whiteboard with a marker, and now they're creating a menu, and it's about like the right things. It's about notepads and different they love different kinds of papers, or taking construction paper. Sometimes I cut it in small squares and I put that inside a box with like one marker, and that becomes it's just, but the simplicity part, right? Rather than like putting all the markers. And then they wake up in the morning, and I try to create like different environments. Like every couple of weeks, they wake up and there's a box with the marker they've seen forever, but it's that one marker in the box. And then their construction paper that's always in front of them, but it's cut into small pieces. And they're like, ooh, what's this? And then like they go into their own world, and it's so beautiful to watch that. But the simplicity is where the power is, because the less there is, the more they will do with what they have. And yeah, it's a science.
That's a beautiful ending to this conversation, Cindy. Perfectly said. I want to thank you. This has been a lot of fun talking and just kind of exploring ideas. I love your background too, that it comes with learning about the brain, and how the brain works. Is there anything you'd like to plug before we sign off? Is there anything coming down the pipe for you?
Just in terms of the research, everything we spoke about, there's some study out there, whether it's loose parts or open-ended play. So I do invite people that are listening to go to Google Scholar, search that, and then type in open-ended play preschool or loose parts preschool or educational toy preschool, because it does open your world to like, there is research behind this, But thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you. Play, like I said, is the thing I'm most passionate about. And there's another conversation I'm having where we're going to talk about play and all of this, but in the apps, the app world and the TV world, and how you can learn all that. I think there's a shift, but for me, it's just so important that we talk about this.
Absolutely.
There's the Curious Neuron podcast if people are interested in learning more about like brain development and parenting behaviors, like when to step in, how to scaffold play, and all of that kind of stuff. Like I have episodes around that. There's the blog, curiousneuron.com. I have graduate students in neuroscience that are writing blog posts for me, and we're working together to, answer questions that parents have. And I have the academy there where there's some courses. And I also have Instagram. So curious_neuron on Instagram, on Facebook. There's the YouTube channel as well. We're just trying to create as much free content for parents as possible, so that they can learn from research.
Awesome. I think teachers too would benefit tons also. And yeah, I encourage you guys to follow Curious Neuron on Instagram. There's always some gems in there that will give you something to think about.
Thank you.
And I definitely, I'm going to dive into your podcast over the holidays and
thank you so much.
Learn more about the simplicity of play, and because I'm fascinated with it as well. But thank you very much for joining us today, and I wish you a great holiday season.
Thank you, you too, Chris.
Continue good luck with those three littles, and I hope that you find a little bit of rest for yourself along the way.
Thanks for this conversation. I really appreciate it.
It was great.
Bye.
Well, take care, and we'll talk soon.
I will. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.